some of those meetings with communities had not been determined at that point. And I'm discomforted by whatever this means. I don't know what it means. I'd like to offer a substitute motion to more or less fit my own comfort level today, and it can live or die with the support or non-support of our directors. And I'd like to move staff's recommendation with the exception, Madam Chair, of the new, what staff is calling the new roadway, segment C, for the airport gateway, which includes 2 different road segments. But I'm moving staff recommendation, say for the new roadway or the segment C called new roadway in our notes.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. I think I need some clarification on that. You are doing a substitute motion, moving the recommended option, but you said something about the new section C on the airport gateway. And what about it?
I would leave the segment C, which is the new road, the one with Stuckey Avenue,
right,
coming all back around by the golf course and going over to Lake Bradford Road. Mm-hmm. We can leave that one on the banks. It's not ready. It's not travel ready today. The one that highlights Spring Hill Road, there's nothing spooky about that. It's ready to travel. So with the exception of I'm taking that, I don't have anything other than what I have, what's being called segment C, the new roadway, right, of the, I'm asking that we move everything else and keep that money, keep that gunpowder dry, and let's not use it today.
Excluding segment C?
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
Is there a second?
Second. Before we go any further, Director White has a comment regarding existing contracts related to segments.
Yeah, kind of 2 points, commissioners. The first one this motion would be addressing the funding of the segment. It would require a substantial amendment to remove the segment. So those are 2 different things. And then the other point is we would need to at least be able to fund the current contract and the current expenditures that we have, because we, based on IA board direction before, have been moving forward with segment C, and so we have an existing contract and existing commitments that we would have to be able to fund. So we would have to at least have that much money. And
is that amount $1.2 million or is it 800,000? The existing contracts. I mean, it's not a hell of a lot of money.
Well, we've spent over $6 million altogether on the airport gateway project, all segments included. I think for segment C, we've spent over $2 million on just segment C alone.
So what are the contracts? I mean, I'm not talking about we spent, I'm talking about that which would negate our moving because of some contracts that Artie has mentioned.
For segment C, we reached the 60% design late last year, so we're moving that segment into final design, so the contracts are related to design.
Okay, and I think that you all indicated to us, if memory serves me well, about $1 million, 1.2, somewhere between 8 and 1.2. Notes would be provided from our minutes, I'm certain. That's not an inflammatory amount of money versus 123 million additional dollars. And I'd rather put the breakdown here. And I'm not killing the project, seeking the substantial amendment thingy. It's just that we're delaying it or deferring it to a year of 26 and 7. Now, if what you're telling me is that we're mandated to act because staff has recommended, then just tell me that staff runs the show. And we really don't have that option as directors here. That could be the only other interpretation. But to meet the contractual obligations for them to finish, they can finish that design. Let's pay that bill. I'd rather pay that $1 million that we owe, and we have it on the shelf. We have many studies on the shelf. But let's not commit to an amount that you're saying is 124 million right now. But Ms. Calder, you're saying we really don't know what the final bill is going to be. I don't like that, and I'm willing to pay $1 million and defer this down the road, not killing it, not taking it off, but letting the rest of this not be held hostage. And we're much more clear about the $12 million that it takes to do Spring Hill Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Just direction from our attorney. There was a motion, and we halted it. I didn't get a second.
I seconded
One
it,
over
Madam
here
Chair.
was trying to say.
Second.
Oh, it was second. Commissioner Matlow, okay. Let's hear from Mayor Daley.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And once again, I want to thank staff for this nationally award-winning budget that is before us, consideration at this workshop. I know y'all put a lot of time and energy into it. Madam Chair, I would argue that the secondary motion that was made is out of order because it is technically a motion for a substantial amendment. Madam Chair, I'll tell you how I see it. Look, there was an effort to change the scope of the Airport Gateway project. And I applaud the efforts. I think hearts and minds were into it. However, the record reflects the motion failed. I was not here for that vote. I don't support it. So if it came back up, it does not have the votes. This body has spoken. The Airport Gateway, as the scope is designed right now, is how we're moving forward. If the substitute motion, and I could be wrong, if the substitute motion is germane, because it is technically a substantial amendment that's being proposed during a budget workshop by defunding that particular segment, I would number one argue that if we're going to go down this path again, this is not the appropriate forum. It needs to be done at a meeting. But number two, if it is going to go through, then it needs to go through by the same vote count of what is required. Not a simple majority for a budget amendment, but by a supermajority of what it takes to pass a substantial amendment. And quite frankly, again, the votes are not there. This board has spoken. Also, I'd like to remind this board that it's not just the IA contracts and money that has been spent, but it is also the city of Tallahassee and the money that we have spent at our airport to make alignments for transportation patterns in regards to the direction that this board has previously given. And I'm looking at Wayne Tedder to make sure I got that correctly. And in fact, Madam Chair, if appropriate and if you are interested, I am sure that Assistant City Manager Tedder can tell you the millions of dollars that the city has spent with the expectation of a binding vote that this board took in regards. Also, I would be remiss if I did not bring up, and correct me if I'm wrong too, that by defunding a particular segment of this program, you are actually changing the prioritization of the projects. If we delay this by a year, and that is also, I would say, a discussion that should take place at a meeting and not necessarily during the budget workshop. And while I understand and applaud Commissioner Proctor's efforts focusing on the fiscal aspect, at the end of the day, what you are doing is changing the prioritization, and you are delaying this project and moving it back in the scope, which impacts all of the projects as well. We have had many conversations at this board over many years on both prioritization. We've had many conversations over many meetings, over major amendments. And this board has been very clear, I believe, on both the direction of prioritization and the direction on major amendments and scope of projects. I am fully prepared to support my original motion on the table. Again, reminding everyone that this is a budget workshop. This is not the end-all, be-all. We will be back discussing this budget workshop in August and with final approval at the end of September. I do appreciate the conversation because this is how the workshops are supposed to go, but there are major issues that are being addressed that need to be addressed formally if this is the way that this board wants to go. And again, it's the major amendment process and the prioritization process and how it relates to a budget workshop. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Caban, and then Commissioner Matlow, and then Commissioner. And you get what?
Can I get the attorney's opinion on that? I mean, he basically said that it was out of order because it deemed to be a special amendment.
Yeah, I plan to do that, but I wanted to hear from
okay.
them first, and then Commissioner Proctor. Commissioner Caban.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. May I address staff?
May I address staff, Madam Chair?
Yeah, you can address your concern and then we'll decide.
Well,
Go to staff.
Commissioners, or directors, this is kind of a rhetorical question, but I also would like to hear staff's opinion. Right now, I want to point something out. We are voting on $123 million. We've already spent $6 million, not including what the city of Tallahassee spent at the airport, based on a letter of intent. A letter of intent is non-binding. No bank in the history of the United States of America would give a $123 million loan or move forward with a letter of intent. I will sit here and drop this conversation if we go get a hard contract from Florida State University that is not a letter of intent. If FSU drops a letter of intent, we're holding the bag on $6 million plus whatever the city of Tallahassee invested. I think I'm gonna continue to say this over and over again. Last year, we had, I think it was a 10-2 vote in this same board that we did not have sufficient information by staff. And by the way, I appreciate all the effort on the budget. I'm just stating where we are in the design phase to approve a $40 million increase. Nothing has changed. We still don't have that information. Yet we're now voting on it again, and it's before us again. I'm just a little disappointed as a board. I appreciate all the effort, and I know that we have money invested. I think before we continue to invest more money, we should at least go get a hard contract from Florida State University. But we're doing all this on a letter of intent, which is non-binding. They can walk away any minute, and we're holding the bag. I mean, that's not good business. It's not being fiscally responsible. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Matlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to get clarification because I'm looking at the minutes from the last meeting, and you mentioned that the substantial amendment vote failed, which was accurate. The first one, which was made by Commissioner Caban, to remove segments A and C, 4-lane Spring Hill Road, and construct the Providence improvements. But the next motion was Commissioner Richardson's motion, which was to fully fund the airport gateway scope, and that motion also failed. So I'm a bit confused. Our standing direction is still 82 million. We had a failed motion at our last meeting not to restore the budget, and now we have a staff recommendation to restore the budget. Can you help me reconcile that?
Mr. White.
Yes, Commissioner. As we put together the budget, we have specific things that we have to do. One of those is have a budget that's balanced, which we present here. But we're also tasked with implementing projects that the IA board has approved with the scopes that have been approved. And to do that, we have a recommendation in this budget to reconcile those two things.
Sure. And just for clarity, at the last meeting, you had that same recommendation to request the additional $40 million for this project, and this board voted that down. I just want to have that on the record. And then to Mayor Daley's point, I agree that these should be discussed at meetings. There was another motion on the floor at our last meeting, which was a different substantial amendment than the one that failed, because I think we're all trying to find compromise and how we can move this forward. We didn't have a quorum. All board members weren't here. But to your point, we should all get on the record and just vote. If it's up or down, then we can move ahead. But I understand where you're coming from on maybe if everybody was here, maybe the vote would be different. Maybe it would be, but we should all be here for the conversation to decide that. And then we have several budget workshops ahead of us. I think these conversations will continue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Proctor.
Madam Chair, I want to make clear that the mayor's comments were long but not persuasive. This is a workshop that's under your name that says a workshop on the proposed fiscal year 2025 operating budget and 5-year capital improvement plan for the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency. So we're here to talk about money. This is what this public notice is about. That's what I am talking about. So comments of the mayor are, those are his comments. But what I'm talking about today in this budget are technical flaws in a budget that is not reconciled. Now, what I didn't come to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, and that's essentially what this staff is asking for, and I'm not willing to do it because we don't have a cost. We don't have definitive clarity. And from what I have read, and I can only go by what's been read, and I looked at this thing, we have down here on our staff's projection that $3 million is coming for a donation. And under the donation, there is nobody's name. I asked about what does that mean, and no one, they told me that was Florida State. Now, with that amount of money contributed, the language says that this $3 million donation was committed by Florida State University to help fund segment 3. And that's kind of misleading. Hell, I thought the money was in the bank. It said it was committed. I mean, but it didn't say it was relinquished. It didn't say it was surrendered. It didn't say that it was there, we'd received. It said it was committed. And I'll fall on the sword and say that I myself misread it as being monies that had been surrendered, remitted to Blueprint. So I apologize, commissioners, for not reading that well enough. However, I don't apologize for my desire to not, and the technical flaw with this, Mr. Mayor, is I'm not willing to sign on such a huge and staggering project, of which Florida State is nowhere to be found. The last 2 meetings, they didn't send a living soul here. Their practice, their habit, when they want something, they show up, they're loud, they're in your face, you will know. We can't get a commitment on whether we're going to get the $3 million. That's not clear. And we're talking about Florida State from June 2019. If we're talking about June 2019, the Florida State that existed, the powers that be, that's not the same element. We need to re-up and get something renewed, a new affirmation, a reaffirmation of where they're coming from. There's silence, there's ambiguity. This is totally, as Commissioner Caban has said, some letter of intent. This right here from 2019, I'm not impressed with. We're on the hook for $3 million that Florida State committed to give to a neighborhood so as to appease their dissatisfaction with their neighborhood being torn up. And they asked for things which Commissioner Williams-Cox said they deserve, and I agree. But they have a city government also that could provide, I imagine, the same things for $3 million. But Florida State said, we'll take care of that if it's okay with you, community. So, Mr. Mayor, good directors, I say to you that at this budget workshop, and that's what I came to talk about, I wouldn't have read this as intently as I've tried had I thought this was just play, and staff would just tell us that we, because I can get up and leave now if I'm just here and staff got this, and I'm duty bound to honor some staff. My mind is here because I was elected, and I'm here to think about an area that's very close to the area which I'm elected from. And so that's why the technical flaws and NDA type of instrument is what this is. We don't have the disclosure of what we're binding ourselves to. We don't have the commitment from this new administration from Florida State of what they bind themselves to, and failure to secure that would mean that ultimately this body would have to write the checks to pay for everybody's shortcomings. That's why I've raised this and offered the substitute motion and ask your support, unless our staff says that we don't have the power. They do. We don't have that power. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. I'm going to ask if Mr. White can respond to that, and then I'd like to ask for clarification to our attorney.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, the proposed budget is the continuation of the implementation of many projects, but specifically regarding the airport gateway. If anyone wants to know whether FSU is committing to the funding beyond the letter of intent, the continuation of this project, some of the very immediate next steps are to take it from a letter of intent to a JPA. It requires us to move forward with the project to get there. And we don't get the $3 million until construction starts. So if we don't move forward with the project, we can't, one, no, because we won't have the JPA, or two, we can't get the $3 million. They've committed the $3 million. We just haven't received $3 million because that's contingent upon construction starting. If you want to know what the cost of the project is, we have to continue the project. The segments have to be designed. We have to understand the permitting requirements, and then it would have to go to bid to get the cost of the project. So, the things that are being asked for around this table are what comes next. And this budget moves us to those next steps.
Thank you. Let me ask a question, and then Commissioner Caban, I'll come to you. You all know we have our regular meetings starting at 3, so we're going to try to wrap this up. Madam Attorney, I
Yes, Madam
wanted to ask you, there's been some discussion about whether or not taking this segment pursuant to Commissioner Proctor's motion off of this project, whether or not that's elevated to requiring a substantial amendment process. And the motion wasn't fashioned in that way. So to be procedurally correct, should it be fashioned in that way?
Madam Chair, I can address that. The mayor raised some very good points, which are supported legally by our bylaws. So the one point that Mayor Daley raised was that a delay in and of itself would be a substantial amendment. And he's correct regarding that. It would be a substantial change. Under the bylaws, either delaying or advancing a project would require a substantial amendment. So that's number one. Changing the prioritization also is a factor or activity that would require a substantial amendment. Trying to defund this particular project, it would not be proper to change the scope within a budget workshop within this motion, because it would bypass the substantial amendment process, which, as we know, requires the recommendation of the IMC, the TCC, the CAC, and 2 public hearings, as well as a supermajority vote of the members who are county commissioners and city commissioners of this body. One important thing I do want to address, there was discussion of an LOI and how all of this project is based on the LOI. That is not correct. The key thing to remember here is that the current project scope for the airport gateway, we arrived at this point because there was a substantial amendment to the original airport gateway project that brought us to this point. So there were 2 public hearings, maybe even more. I wasn't here at the time. There was also the supermajority vote of the then existing IA board members who voted to put the project scope where it is now. So there was a process. The project scope is not purposeful from the LOI. It does not arise from the LOI. It arrives from the actions of this IA board, which included public hearings and a supermajority vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Attorney. Let me just follow up too, and I can recall that the board voted at one point to reduce the cost of the project. I believe it was Commissioner Caban that provided the motion, and it was second from 120 or 117 million to 82 million. And I believe it passed, but was it not effective because it wasn't triggering the substantial amendment process, so that wasn't part of the motion?
It did
I'm
not
trying to
change
figure out where
It
we.
did not change the scope.
Okay,
And I think the board struggled with this at the last meeting, which is, and staff as well, which is what do we do now that we are several months later, almost half a year later, going into a new fiscal year, trying to plan for a new fiscal year, and we still have the same scope? How do we proceed as staff with a contractor on board who is moving toward, a design, getting to 100% design? We're not at 100%, but moving in that direction. How do we proceed with the same amount of money? So we're looking for direction from the board, not necessarily in this budget workshop in terms of scope, but eventually that has to be dealt with. If it is not, then our direction is to proceed with the scope that we have. And the question is, how do we fund that? So the funding piece is before you, but not necessarily the scope. In order to change the scope, there has to be the substantial amendment process pursuant to your interlocal agreement and pursuant to the bylaws.
thank you, Madam Attorney, for that clarification. Commissioner Caban, and then Commissioner,
What is that?
a follow-up question to the attorney.
It would be my assessment that the substitute motion, the portion regarding the funding of segment C would be improper. That would be my opinion on that.
Or if he amended it to also include triggering the substantial amendment process, would it be proper?
Well, the proper place for that, because this is a budget workshop.
Right.
Would be the regular meeting and perhaps director discussion, because I don't think there's an agenda item in the regular meeting that would entail this. So it would be the director discussion portion to bring that up,
Okay.
discuss it, have motion, second, and, if it passes, have staff initiate the substantial amendment process.
Okay. Let me ask Commissioner Proctor, would you be willing to just withdraw your motion and we address this when we have our business meeting beginning at 3?
First, let me ask a question. So everything that I've heard our staff say is that if we voted this budget down, all of us would be in trouble, and we don't have an option of saying no to this budget. That's what I heard. So we have to, because even though we have a design, it's only 60% design, yet we have a contractor who we've paid, and he's ready to go. Or she's ready to go, whoever it is, but they're ready to go. So we're behind 6 months to people that we've promised and committed. And whether we have FSU's money or their commitment updated, or whether we have this new administration FSU's commitment, we're ready to go because we have lined up people who we want to pay. So my motion is out of order at a budget workshop to say there are technical flaws of which we don't have finite definition of how much money. We have seen again and again, if that doesn't work over and over, we've seen from 82 million to 124 million. This body has voted for 82 million, but we can't hold it. Then the staff comes here today and said, we're not even sure on that. That's what they've said to us. I'm only listening to words offered, but I'm withdrawing my motion because I recognize, though I'm going to vote against this budget and the mayor's motion, I recognize that we really can't because we would be substantially out of compliance. So we have no option. There's nothing really here to vote on.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor, for withdrawing the motion. Let's hear from Commissioner Williams-Cox and then Commissioner Welch. And I'm trying to get to commissioners that we haven't heard from, and we do have a 3 o'clock business meeting.
And Madam Chair, thank you. And that was my reason for asking, because I have not spoken on this. I'm ready to call the question, so we can move.
Okay, don't
But
call it yet.
Right, I'm saying I'm ready. I heard you say there's somebody else, but
Point of order, I have not
Let
withdrawn
me
my
hear from
second.
Commissioner Welch, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you all hear me? I apologize for my tardiness. Listen, I think that what the conflict we're having is because we have put our staff in this position of conflict. This is a budget workshop. They're trying to move a budget for these big projects that we've directed them to move. And they're all tangled up because we have tangled them up. If we want to initiate a substantial amendment process for the airport gateway, that should be done at the business meeting at 3 o'clock. You can do that. It can be done in director time. We can vote on it. It can pass or fail. But in this context, I want to commend the staff for doing the best you can in this environment where we're trying to mess it up from technical reasons. It's a difficult situation. These are big $100 million projects that are built out over a decade, and we're trying to move the ball down the field. There's 2 more budget workshops where I'm sure we'll have these same convoluted conversations. I just want to say thank you for all the work you've put in, and I intend to vote, obviously, for the staff recommendation to move the ball on down the field. And then we want to talk about the projects. We can definitely do that in the 3 o'clock meeting at director time, which is where we were at before, if you recall, when we lost a quorum. So that would be my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Madam Chair, can I finish?
I'm sorry.
I would hope, Commissioner Proctor, that we could keep a quorum. And now, thank you. You can call the question.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Commissioner Caban, last comment, and then I'm going to call for the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to address Madam Attorney, if that's okay with you, based on 2 points she said a minute ago. Madam Attorney, you made the comment that the LOI would not change the project if FSU walked on their LOI. What would happen with segment C?
Did you direct that question to staff?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to speculate and respond to that. We have been, when I say we, I'm talking myself and other staff members, have been working with FSU over the past year. First of all, we extended the LOI. Let me first be clear on that. They have been willing and engaged in talking to us over the past year to get to the point where we have a complete and ready to execute agreement that they can take to their board of trustees once the IA board is comfortable with the project, the information and provisions in that JPA. So it's not as though FSU has been silent. We have been working with them. So we fully anticipate that they will honor the commitments that they made in the LOI.
But your statement was if they walked on the LOI, that it wouldn't change the project. We don't own that land. They own the land. So if they don't donate the land, what happens to segment C?
Well, the state owns the land, not FSU. FSU
It's a land lease. It's a land lease.
FSU is the leasee. We would certainly bring that to the board if that, but at this point, I'm not going to speculate. At this point in time, FSU is working with us, moving toward a JPA, finalizing an agreement.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, in last fall, we were able in a budget workshop to set the budget, to keep the budget at $82 million when the staff recommendation was to go up to 123. That didn't require a substantial amendment. That required a simple majority. So why is that different in this budget workshop?
Well, if we're talking about the last amendment, I think that's different. This was specifically to remove funding for segment C, which under the bylaws would be tantamount to changing the scope of it. I don't think
That's not what he said, though.
If I could finish answering your question, there was no reference, I believe, and I'll have to look back, to a specific segment, in that it was just overall moving from one number to another, which this board can certainly do. But when you change the scope in terms of chopping out one particular segment or portion of it, then that will trigger the substantial amendment process.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, directors, I'm prepared to vote on this. Either way it goes, I'm prepared either way. I've said my piece. I just want to point something out. The rules are constantly changing in this board. What happened last fall is different now. And anytime that there is something in this board that doesn't go with staff recommendation, the rules change and we become hand-tied. And I'm not saying it's y'all's fault, but it's becoming frustrating because last fall we had a budget workshop and this was no problem. Now all of a sudden in this budget workshop, it's not okay. And there's just no consistency, and we're hand-tied as electeds to do what we need to do, what we want to do. And I'm prepared to vote on it, and I'm willing to drop the conversation after this. But I will say it is very, very frustrating. People can go back and watch the tape from last fall, and the rules have changed. And Commissioner Proctor is just asking to change the budget on a segment. Okay, this is a budget workshop. So we are setting the budget, and now we're saying we can't set the budget. It's just inconsistent, it's frustrating, and it doesn't work in the benefit of the people. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Caban. We haven't heard from Commissioner Maddox. Okay, I'll allow you briefly. Yes, sir. Okay. All right, we're going to call the vote. Commissioner Proctor withdrew his substitute, so we're going to vote on the original motion from the mayor, which is option 1. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Oh, but we might need getting ready to say that. We might need a roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Daley,
Aye.
Commissioner Matlow,
Nay.
Commissioner Porter,
Nay.
Commissioner Williams-Cox,
Aye.
Commissioner Caban, Commissioner Cummings,
Yes.
Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Minor,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe,
No.
Commissioner Proctor, and Commissioner Welch.
And we'll wait for the result.
Passes.
Does pass.
Okay. So option 1 does pass. Mr. White, is there anything further?
Not until your 3 o'clock meeting.
Thank you so much. Thank you, commissioners. We appreciate your comments. We certainly appreciate staff. You all make us look really good with all the accolades, local, state, and national. And we adjourn until 3 o'clock.
Every tree that we plant is important that it does well because I want it to reach its full potential. We want to make sure that these trees that are put in the city's medians and the streets and in the parks are the best quality graded tree as we can at a young age. As if a tree is expected to live 30, 40 years, that's longer than my time is going to be in terms of working years. And so it's important that we kind of get it right. My name is Dan Fenley, Maintenance Chief over at Community Landscaping in the city that is essentially not in a park setting. So anywhere there's a median or right of way where there are trees purposely planted. But primarily, my department is looking at anything that needs to be manicured.